kids move from second to third grade, often teachers will say, okay, we are moving on from learning to read to now reading to learn. So the expectation when kids are in third grade or older is that they're reading fluently, and more importantly, that they're reading for comprehension, that they're able to read something and learn and retain and understand the information. But reading comprehension can be very difficult. And why is it so hard for so many kids or adults for that matter? The reason is because to be a strong reader and have strong reading comprehension requires every cognitive skill, and we'll talk about what those are in a second, to be strong. So for example, the main foundation of having strong reading comprehension is being a fluent reader. Because even if a child has strong skills like memory and reasoning, if they're expending a lot of mental energy just figuring out what each word is, trying to decode and sound the word out, they're not in the flow of the story. There's so much mental effort just on the mechanics of reading that they're not really retaining or like absorbing the information. So to be a fluent reader typically requires strong auditory processing, which is the ability to decode words. That's the ability to process sounds, but also memory, right? Because about 60% of our language, unfortunately, are non-phonetic words. So a word like laugh, you can't sound that out if you wanted to. Your child just needs to know laugh is laugh, and that takes memory. So assuming fluency is strong, it still requires other areas like long-term memory. Right? Long-term memory would be if you're reading a book, a couple chapters, you put it away for a few days, you or your child come back to read chapter 3. Do you remember the plot? Do you remember the characters, what was happening, or do you have to go back and reread it? That's long-term memory. Working memory is more in the moment. Working memory would require you to reread information. So it's where you read a paragraph or something and get to the end and they're not retaining what you just read. And so that can really slow you down with reading. And if working memory is not strong, reading comprehension is going to suffer. Visual processing is an important reading comprehension skill, especially for fiction or fantasy, books where you're picturing it, because visual processing is our ability to picture some of what we're reading. And on top of that, logic and reasoning is critical. So I just met with a family where their child's a good reader, but they don't really understand the main point. They're reading it and not really understanding the motivation behind characters or why they're doing things, not making the correct inferences, drawing the right conclusions. That's logic and reasoning, which becomes more important as our kids get older and what they read becomes more complex. And then lastly would be processing speed. It's how fast your brain can function. And that's critical because when you are reading, there is so much processing going on, figuring out the words, putting the words together in their context. And so the ability to absorb what you're reading takes a lot of processing speed. And we'll hear from a lot of families that if processing speed's not strong, it'll cause mental fatigue when a child's reading because they have to exert so much mental energy to process. So reading comprehension really requires strong cognitive skills. If you have a child who struggles in that area, you can give us a call and we can do an initial assessment, which will help identify the root cause, which is the key. Because if you don't know the root cause, it becomes really hard to address and improve that situation.